Well, we want to become a community that gives attention to global, regional, and local responsibilities, not just serving, whoop, window popped up over my notes, there we go, not just serving the centralized and well-resourced, but also the local and emerging. So, Adeolu, are you with us and ready? Adeolu will introduce our presenters for the topic of regional people groups data and the gaps that may exist. Adeolu?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And again, a very warm welcome to everyone. Yeah, so this afternoon, we're going to have some interesting conversations. We'll be looking at regional people group data and the gaps therein. And I will not be doing this alone. Have some friends, and I'll be having these conversations together. Have Azan Dan Karami. Azan is an indigenous mission leader for the past 15 years. He has been the National Research Director for the Alliance of Missions and Evangelical Churches in Republic du Niger. And he has done that for 25 years. He's married to Mary, the OOM's Sahel Mission Director. They have 8 children only and 6 grandchildren. Also, it's my pleasure to introduce Warren Lawrence. If you don't mind, if I mention your name, would you just give a raise of the hand so that our other friends will be able to. Yeah, thank you, Warren. Warren and his wife have been married for 35 years. They have 5 adult children, and he's been serving God in mission research in full time since 1991. First with Global Mapping International, based in Colorado. And now he's moved to One Challenge in Singapore. They have served for the past 22 years in Southeast Asia. For many years, Warren was a coordinator of research in the Asia region and recently became the director of global research for OC. The OC Global Research Team is a collection of 14 full-time and part-time research specialists living in 6 different countries from the US to Mongolia, and who meet regularly virtually. It's also my pleasure to introduce Gerard Imana from Burundi. Gerard, it's a pleasure to have you on the call today. Gerard has been married to Caritas for 7 years. The Lord has blessed them with 2 sons, and a 3rd is on the way. Amen. And after graduation in 2010, and of course, he had some stint of Christian volunteer service with Capro. Gerard went to Kenya for discipleship and mission studies. He completed those studies in South Africa in 2016 and began work in northern part of Kenya in the Kakuma refugee camp as a missionary. And later he felt God calling him to return to Burundi, where he has been mobilizing and discipling the church for missions. Gerard had the privilege of introducing Kairos and perspectives on the world Christian movement in that country. Gerard, I know you're on the call. If you don't mind, just give a raise of the hand and probably we can spotlight you. And our good friend, George Guma, at some point probably might be joining the conversation. George is from Ghana. He's married to Joanna. They have a baby girl. He's been with Pioneers Africa in Accra since 2011. He has a background in geography and resource development, and of course, some training in divinity. George developed interest in mission research as a way of contributing to national mission information work. And of course, George is also with Ghana Evangelism Committee, as well as the Ghana Evangelical Mission Association. And of recent, he's been helping the Pentecost Center for Unreached People Group. And of course, it's our pleasure to have you, gentlemen, to do this discourse. I won't be putting you on the spot, but of course, I'll be happy to call you and probably ask you to respond to a question or two. We trust that we're going to have a good time together. Warren, let me start with you, if you don't mind. Give us a sense of understanding of regional people group. I understand that we could have some friends on the call. Probably some of these register words may sound a bit new, and you've been doing this, for long. Would you mind, in a minute, just give us some form of understanding? What do we even mean when we talk about regional people group data in general? Over to you, Warren.
Yeah, I started out my work with people group research as a global researcher. And then as I moved out of the United States into Asia, I became more of a regional researcher. What I discovered in Asia after a couple of decades is that there tend to be global researchers and there tend to be country researchers. Between those two, I don't find that there are a lot of regional researchers, and that could be for many reasons. But I tend to work with national researchers or global researchers, more with countries researchers in the last 10 or 15 years in people group related research. Let me share one image with you, if I can. This is perhaps one of the reasons that we do, instead of global research and country research, there's a bit of a difficulty. This is my area of the world. In the green is, and the bottom is a whole variety of different ethnic groups. The red is a whole cluster of groups. And then the blue is the Tibetan groups. You'll see that they aren't along country borders. And so where we have country researchers that are next to one another, regional research for people groups are generally in clusters of people groups, affinity groups, as this map actually shows. And so it's a good thing to do regional related research because it combines things, but it's a difficult, sometimes place to find people that do their research across country borders. And then there's ones that work globally. So I've generally found that there are, in people group research, it's actually ever significantly micro research or it's macro, and in between isn't so common, although that's been my focus in Asia, in several different regions of Asia. I also find that organizations or denominations tend to break up their groups or people groups in either geographic or affinity groups, cultural related groups, and they sometimes don't agree in language because of that. And so the geography grouping of people groups and the culture grouping of people groups, you just saw the red and the blue, green there as culture. Some organizations are starting to identify their researchers by cluster and affinity groups. Others stick to countries and UN regions of the world. So there's a bit of a gap in there, which way you organizationally identify your people group information. And I've tended to work with both and did a lot of work with language and ethno-linguistic groups in the past, and those are by affinity groups. I find that in the more recent years, the diversity and the mosaic that is the people groups are becoming more and more micro because we're getting beyond language to many different social groups, castes, communities, and migrant peoples, refugees. Those type of populations are needing to be tracked at very more micro levels. And that's the greatest challenge in our day, is displaced peoples.
Yeah, thank you, Warren. I mean, I'm still coming back to you, and thank you for that elaborate, eye-opening explanation. George, let me come to you, even though we have on your tag Gerard, and I'm wondering, anyway. George, I just want to ask you, you've been on this for quite some time. Share with us, what are some successes you are happy to let us know about as far as people group, regional people group data is concerned? Let's hear one or two things from you. And Azan, I will be asking you same question in just a moment. So, George, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Very well.
Okay. So as Warren said, I also started more on a national basis. That is where I started gathering information about and sharing and verifying how authentic they are, trying to look at the gaps and gathering information on them. So at the national level, we realized that there were still challenges, but trying to gather these challenges and work at them at the national level, I realized that there's also there's also the importance of expanding to the regional level. So I started building some contacts, especially in Africa. We have let me take it from West Africa first. We have both Francophone countries, Anglophone countries, and other Portuguese as well. So there's that diversity, and we need to bridge that gap in terms of people group lists in the region. And in this case, there's that variation of languages. And gradually, I'll say with time, I've been able to build some few contacts in some of these countries, not only in West Africa, but also across the other regions in Africa. And we are gradually seeing people, a lot of researchers who were only somehow interested in church survey coming to embrace the idea of people group and people group lists. So I think establishing that contact is one key thing I want to share. And these conferences is exposing so many people to people group lists. And I want to celebrate that. And so we've been able to track a lot of people groups. We've been to countries. I shared some few years back that we realized that we shared about people group lists outside of Ghana, and they said, "Hey, we have been doing this work, and are you telling that this group is still unreached?" So we said no. So we need to build contact in each country, as many as we can. We've not been able to touch base with information workers in each country, but like Gerard is on this call, Pastor Hassan is on this call. Those are some of the contacts we are gradually building, and we hope that we can get people interested in people group research. So in each of these countries in the region, so that we can collaborate and see how we can continue to build credible, well-resourced people group lists and information from each of the countries in the region. And as I made mention some time ago, some churches are gradually embracing the whole idea and concept of people group lists. And one of the churches I want to mention is the Church of Pentecost. And it's out of this conversation, one of the home and urban missions leader was on this call last year. And through that, they decided to set up the Pentecost Center for Unreached People Groups. And this is also to help investigate and research on some of the gaps that we have been identifying, so that we can gather the information, ethnographic information, we can verify the demographic information from our census, and make this information richer and also available for the global information workers. Thank you.
That's very interesting to know. I mean, I'm personally fascinated to, the impact story of the Church of Pentecost. For our other friends on the call, Church of Pentecost is one of the leading church groups in Ghana, and it's good to know that this is happening. George, do you have Gerard close by? Otherwise,
Gerard is using a different device. We are in different countries now. So
okay.
I think he's hearing us.
Okay, Gerard, you probably want to give a hand so I might confirm that you're on the call. And while we do that, Azan, I think it would be good to hear from you. I hope Azan is still with us. Azan, do you want to share with us what has been the success story of regional people group data, probably from Republic of Niger into the Sahel? Do we still have Azan?
Yes.
Oh, please.
Can you hear me?
Great, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yes. So it's so great to look at people group, especially in the Sahel and particularly in the Niger Republic. Some of the data published are not taking in account the official statistics or the official classification of ethnic groups. And when subgroups are made, you can see some big groups, like if you take Niger, the Hausa group people is more than 52% of the population of the country, but is divided only in two subgroups. And in reality, there are more than 10 subgroups. And what is very interesting is when we go through these 10 subgroups, we can see 3 particular subgroups where we have more Christians, or where Christianity has penetrated more deeply than others. So what is interesting in that, this helps us to focus our interest and our efforts to come more enriched in a particular group, given group. Another information is like in Niger we have 4 different groups of Arabs, but in some classification we can see around 8, and sometimes it creates some confusion, and because most of the time people are mentioning we have some percentage of Arab people groups in Niger who are Christian, which we are not aware of, and it will not help us to understand the effort made this last 5 years, where we have seen Arab churches located, and we know the places, we know who they are and how they got converted. So this, in brief, is what I can highlight. But also, would like to say we have some people group coming from neighboring countries, but they're not mentioned. They are groups of people who are bringing another dynamic of Christianity. They come with their traditional way of doing things, and sometimes to analyze what is the impact of this kind of worship in a basically an environment 99% Muslim. and what is the effect in the evangelism. I don't know if I responded is what you wanted to hear.
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely, Azan. I mean, it's good to learn from you and some of these perspectives. I personally found interesting the classifications of the houses and some other people group that you were talking about. I think that's a similar experience with us in Nigeria, and we're still trying to, you know, approach that with what is probably helpful for effective engagement. So I will come back to you in a moment. I'm wondering if Gerard can hear me. If you can, it would be good to also share from the success story from East Africa. Gerard? Otherwise, yeah, great. Please share with us what has worked in Burundi. What stories do you have for us?
Yeah. First of all, I want to praise God for the data that we already have, because as mobilizers, we've been able to know which and which people group we pray for every day, because we said a team for prayer to be able to pray for each unreached people group every day, because they are documented. They are not only those in Burundi or in our region, but across the globe. And that has been the usefulness of the data that the Joshua Project has been able to provide to us. That's really a praise. And of course, there is this uniqueness of our country, you know, from the south to the north, from the east to the west, we speak the same language.
Wow.
So based on the definition of Joshua Project, there is no way you can say that we have tribes. Yet, with the data that we already have, we have like more than 12 with people groups in Burundi. Of course, we have the natives, which is constituted by Hutu, Twa, and Tutsi. But of course, we have migrants from different areas of the globe, especially Arabs, Swahili, and people from India, Gujarati, and of course from our neighbors and our countries that are neighboring our country. So, but though we have all those data from Joshua Project, there is some gaps. There is some gap because they have been able to document those major tribes, but there are sub-tribes that haven't been documented. And when you narrow down, you will realize that everyone needs to be noted and make sure that everyone is reached in a way that he is able to understand in his culture and mother tongue, if I can say so. And of course, even those migrants, we know that we have Arabs, we have Swahili, we have Gujarati, but we do not know of which tribes are made of those people. I haven't seen those data, and as a mobilizer, I think those are the things that we need to come up with to be able to pray for each and tribe, to bring to God and be able to praise Him. Yeah, I haven't really been doing researches because basically we are mobilizing the church to have this cause heart to reach to the unreached people, to to help them know Him and to be able to praise Him. But I tend to believe that we really need to do more research in our region, in our country, to come up with vivid and tangible data that will help us, be able to know what to do, what to pray for, what is missing, what we have, and all that. If you
Fantastic.
allow, yes, if you
Yeah.
allow,
Okay.
I will go on with this because we have this situation in our country. There is not much that is being done in terms of mission. I mean, the church hasn't been involved in reaching out to unreached people groups due to the lack of biblical perspective, which leads to this conclusion that it's kind of we're waiting for Westerners to come again and help us reach the unreached people groups in our countries, in our region, which is a sad news for us as mobilizers, and the reality that really need to be changed. And again, there hasn't been this deep discipleship mission oriented to raise people knowing that we exist for that reason, because our Father desires to see his people being reached, and he's not using angels, he's not using cherubims. He wants to use us as his children currently, and it's been something amazing, and we desire to see something happen from our church, and it's our prayer you will really join us to pray for that.
Thank you, Gerard. Just a moment. Thank you for sharing this, and we'll definitely come back to these conversations. It's nice hearing this. It's also my personal first time of meeting you, and I think we have a lot to advance further. But if you don't mind, let me return to Warren, and this next question will be for Warren and Azan. We'd like to learn from you guys. What unique approaches, what best practices have you found helpful as far as engaging people group, regional people group data is concerned? I mean, you might have listened to Gerard, even Azan and George mention things around gaps. And let's just quickly go ahead. Let's learn from you, Warren, and of course from Azan. What have you found helpful? What can we learn?
Yeah, I appreciate what Hassan and Gerard both mentioned. The uniqueness and the maturity of churches should focus on the nation and the national leadership and the national church to be raising up better people group information. I'd like to share a little bit of how we did that in our region in Southeast Asia. I'm in a Southeast Asia region, which is 11 countries, about over 1,500 peoples and languages. We divided it into groups, and Indonesia took the lead, and Indonesia understood with its over 700 different ethnic groups that it needed to focus on not all of them, but the ones that were least reached. And so they really were out ahead of the rest of Southeast Asia and produced something like this back in the 1990s. It was a paper, black and white people profiles of just the least reached. So they didn't bother going through the half that were already reached. They were focused on the least reached. And so the church there started with a prayer movement. I think that's one of the biggest things that made God blessed in Indonesia, was to start a prayer movement that informed the research, and the research again informed back to prayer, and then church planting started. So that marriage between information and prayer is really, really important. So across Southeast Asia, we've been able to produce for a couple different countries these type of prayer guides with so many different ethnic groups. It's taken a bit of a work to go ahead and investigate those groups. But in the book that I was engaged with, the Singapore, Malaysia, and Brunei research, we did not do country-related research because all three of these countries have the same cluster of ethnicity. So we did a 3-country guide because of the clusters that were in it. And we found that God had already raised up within those countries different organizations and different denominations that knew their clusters of ethnicity, and we empowered them to do the research. So this is a cooperative work across 3 nations, across 3 major ethnic clusters, and then 4 indigenous clusters of peoples. And we had individual teams doing their own cluster in the work that they had worked at for many years. And so cooperatively in the body of Christ, when you can do that in one language, it helps. If you've got 2 or 3 languages, it becomes a challenge. That's a really big challenge in a regional area, is language. Not only with getting the gospel into it, but when you've got the gospel there, getting the church to mobilize together in the same language is challenging. So we need to get more resources way beyond the English language to the Yoruba, to the Indonesian, to the Mandarin, to the Tamil, these large places where God is raising up the church, multilingual resources for prayer. And researchers need to be aware of that. The multilingual collaboration for the work. So this is what we came up with after a number of, see if I can find it. I was going to share something. These are resources that we've produced over the years. We started with Indonesia, then Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, and then Cambodia and the Philippines. All have these prayer guides to mobilize people to pray by name for the unreached groups in those countries. And that type of work, there's a bit of standardization in the people group profile, but each country did their own expression of that. I think that's really important, that we don't dictate across countries what has to happen, but we do provide some standards, some basic standards to inspire countries to do their own. And the Philippines did their own, Cambodia did their own within the nation. So I really encourage small nations to have a single research group. Really large countries may need to have regional research teams if they can find that within the body of Christ.
Great. Thank you, Warren. I think I love the idea of being intentional about making available this research information packaged in prayer guides, and of course to help users to pray. And that's something that I found very outstanding, and I think it's a good challenge to pick up. We have done something like that in Nigeria. I think Ghana has also done something like that. George can confirm. And yeah, Azan, can we hear from you again? What can we learn? What unique approaches have you found helpful? I believe Azan is still on the call, please.
I don't see him on the call, Adeolu.
Oh, okay. Then I go right to George. George, putting you on the spot again, tell us, what have you found helpful, unique approaches that we can learn from? And of course, if there is something we can learn from your engagement with Church of Pentecost, I mean, such a large denomination in Ghana, we'll be happy to learn. George.
Yes, I hope you can hear me.
Very well.
Yeah, so let me begin from the Church of Pentecost. There was, through the money initiative to verify people group data in every country, when we're going through that initiative in Ghana, we realized that we needed to do more than just verifying the lists and saying this name is not correct. We work on the name, we add and it and all that. So we wanted to do something bigger. That is where we came out with the unreached people group information. But beyond that, we realized that when a people group goes beyond, is considered reached, it doesn't mean that they are completely reached. As we have other classification of richness, we realized that these definitions were good, but sometimes there was some reluctance in continuous engagement of some people group that we considered as weak. So we needed to continue to create that awareness, and that even though a category of people is considered reached and have certain different category, should I say, different levels of richness, we need to continue engaging them. And out of that, we are trying to encourage people groups that are more engaged or more rich, to be empowered, to be trained in missions, to have that mission vision. And because in Ghana, we have people group clusters, and it's similar to some African countries, we have people group clusters. One people group can understand some of the languages in another, some of the words. So we are trying to mobilize some of these people group, for instance, in Ghana, like the Kokomba, so that they are very receptive. The Kusasi, the Frafra are very receptive. So we are trying to encourage them to move into other unreached people groups that are close by. So through the researches that we did on the unreached people group, we realized that many communities do not have churches. So we decided to have a research to work on enumerating all of these communities, whether they are within an unreached or unreached people group, or they are within a people group that are classified as reached. So that is a nationwide project that we did partly, and we want to do it more extensively. And during that time, we had some few collaboration with Church of Pentecost. We realized that they were also trying to identify the unreached in all their districts. So I had the opportunity to get the draft book they had, and that is how come we are building the relationship. And we put this center together, one, to create that awareness of people groups and the fact that there's still more work to be done, and also to have the resource backing. Resource is very key in research, people group research. So to have the resource backing, and also to have more collaboration, where we can have who can be on board to be able to do more extensive work in the country and across Africa. So we are also analyzing census data, which I hope we can go beyond Ghana. To some of these census data would help us to verify some of the information on people groups. And so that is one thing we are also working on, to verify people group data. And we also want to look at church planting. How widespread is church planting across the nation? So if we can have that data, that point data across the country, we've been able to acquire a data like that on about 90% to 95% of churches in Ghana. So when you overlay, you can see areas where churches are not located. And strangely, you can see that most of those areas are where unreached people groups are. So it helps us to now also look at the need areas as well. So this is some of the things we are trying to do, and also developing prayer resources. We want to look at it within each people group in Ghana, and also in each region. So we want to develop these prayer resources that churches can also use to pray. And it's ongoing. We've been using bits and pieces of it to mobilize prayer, but we hope to come up with a very good and comprehensive document that churches and mission agencies can use to ignite prayer for the people groups in Ghana, in West Africa.
Yeah, thank you, George. I found, I mean, we're still back to this issue of being sure of the categorization. I mean, a group is reached, probably going by the 5%, 2% categorization. I think we have similar challenge here also in Nigeria. And I think that's a conversation to really advance. And of course, probably just like Warren, you've been able to also talk of prayer resource. This is one of such that we did in Nigeria, praying through the harvest. It's just focusing the identified unreached people group in Nigeria, and it's been a very helpful resource. All right. Oh, I think we have an interference. Gerard, let me come back to you. Although you've started sharing on this, and it would be good to probably give you a little bit more of time to ask you to share what are your concerns as far as regional people group data is concerned. What are the worries, if I may put it that way, and that you want us to know? And it's okay to also tie that to engagement of the remaining work over there in your region or wherever. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I get you hear me?
Very well.
Okay. I think my greatest concern is the fact that we say that our country specifically is reached at about 90%, which is a pure lie. It's a pure lie in the sense that they are just nominal. You know, they bear a Christian name. They have probably a Bible. They go to church once in a while, but that does not mean that we are Christians. We are not disciples of Jesus Christ. And you know how it came about. It was during colonization. People will be given Christian names and they be considered Christians. And until today, it's said that we are Christianized. We should be at the point of praising, sending, and supporting missionaries, which we can never see happening because actually we have symbolic, nominal Christians that are not discipled to be able to accomplish such great task. That's my greatest concern. And this has been preventing even missionaries from coming to our country to evangelize and make disciples, because it's said that 90% are reached, so the church must be able to do such a great job. That's a great concern as a native of this land and as a mobilizer and as a person who is interested in mission. We really desire things to be changed. That's one. Second, it's my concern. Every tool, every data, everything we have, it's in English. As I'm speaking, English is my third language.
Wow.
So it's a problem because everything we will need to use, we will have to translate it in another language, which requests resources, which requests more time, and the people engagement, which is not always available. And this causes a lack of instrument, a lack of data, a lack of information that our people need to move ahead with others. That's really a major problem. Last is this conflict, almost a conflict between the emerging Christian organizations and the traditional churches. It's like we are challenging them. It's like we are telling them, hey, this is what you haven't been able to do. Because we're saying, hey, we need to join God at what He's doing in His global redemptive plan. And then they are saying, no, we are poor. We do not have what it takes. Other people will do it. we're not qualified, and we are saying no, it's not the way we should be looking. We qualified because we are God's children. We should be trusting God to help us to join others, to move with others in His global redemptive plan. And there is this conflict, a kind of conflict, because it's like we are accusing them. It's like we are telling them, hey, you haven't been able to do what you should be doing. And it's really a concern because we want to see the Church of Burundi, the Church of East Africa participating fully in what God is doing and be able to contribute, because we are blessed to be a blessing to other nations. That's my probably major concern for now.
Thank you, Gerard. I mean, it's absolutely interesting to listen to you share passion. I mean, a gathering like this is for us to begin to think of how we can collaborate together to respond to some of these challenges. And I'm sure I'm looking forward to such happening in this gathering. We just very close to rounding up, but Warren, if you don't mind, I would want to push the question from John to you. It's there in the chat box, but I would just read it. John's asking, when you have conflicting data from sources on the ground or regionally, are you finding ways to de-conflict in ways that build relationship and honor those who are contributing? What's your experience around this?
Yeah, I come from global mapping, where John had also come from. And global mapping was very interested as data gathered from many different sources. They didn't seek to actually put one on top of the other, but they laid them all next to one another. I appreciate that that revealing of people group data, as I think it was Azan said that the Hausa in Niger, he had 12 different categories rather than the 4 that were published and in the global research and things like that. We are all about national related research informing the global body. And so as that's happened, it's mostly in migrant groups in our countries. So the country that I live in is over half migrant populations over different eras. So 200 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, the indigenous people are almost a minority. And so it's these many different groups that are coming in with different numbers, different sizes that we're needing to deal with. We don't deal as much with what he was talking about with the Hausa that are historic and the majority people in the country, and they have varying dialects that are so far apart that they would need a different translation, or they would need different church planting efforts. We would encourage at the national level an expression of that's best used and best understood by the people in that country. And I'm a champion of that. I'm glad to hear that the next session is on national research development, because that's where we need to have the groundwork to inform regional and global research. I hope that there's a filtering up to change global research where it's appropriate and where it's essential. Even publishing within the country things that aren't congruent with the global research is a helpful thing for the national body and the national church there to be helping to inform the world around them. So I'm all for ground-related research, as they call it in India, grassroots research that is informing up in information.
Wow, thank you, Warren. And one of our intention of
Oh, oh.
okay, yeah, one of
No,
our
I
intention.
wanted to add.
Okay,
Okay,
please go
sorry.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly add to what Warren has shared that for me, it's my desire and it's my hope that this platform creates a kind of leverage for us to share and look at what is similar, what is different amongst us. And it's my hope that we'll see more global, regional, and national information workers joining and exploring what is happening in other areas, platforms, learning from one another, and also looking at how to, as you said, bridge some of these information gaps. There are certain information about some people. There are some people that have virtually no information out there. There are some that ethnographic information and even demographic information are varies. But I believe as we meet like this on this kind of forum, we can build a very good relationship that will inure to us coming to that kind of understanding and leveling up in terms of information that we put out there. Because it can bring confusion. It may also bring a lot of lingering questions in the minds of many. So I see this platform as one of the solutions, as much as regional collaborations and national work as well.
Thank you, George. That's very helpful. So sorry, Azan, to know that you're having network challenges. And this way we'll be having it wrapped up. But just one comment before I hand over. I mean, one of the essence of this consultation conference, whatever you want to call it, is this the intentionality in catalyzing collaboration. And I'm happy to commit the CMIW family network to say that we are happy to come behind national, regional efforts in developing, capacity and helping, to be able to respond to some of these issues that we are raising, right about this conversation. I would probably want to request of the goodwill of our speakers, if you don't mind, please do share your email contact for those who might have further questions. I know Warren has done that, and maybe in some ways, and those who are also thinking of collaborating. Thank you very much. It's been a great time. So I call on Chris to take it over from here. Thank you.